China Report.
Well, this ain't the China news, but this idea that these huge conglomerates are giving unbiased news is the same kind of crap that CCP sells. Check
Community
this
television
out.
through shows like Wayne's World. I started in community television in 1986 at Sunrise Cable in Ottawa before going to school to study broadcasting, and that was where I learned about all the different process for broadcasting, and it's what inspired me to go into television. And it's also a place for organizations and community members to be able to have a public discourse, to bring their ideas forward, to because it's non-commercial, it's not driven by the element of money and trying to sell eyeballs to advertisers. So it's not. The purpose is really to bring the community voice into the broadcasting system, and it's really important in terms of things like democratic debates. So we have on our community television station here and on community radio, we get debates for city council elections, uh, you know, for provincial elections, federal elections, and it gives another opportunity for people to hear, what's happening in the community. So there's many different ways that community television and community radio are used, but the key thing is that it's not a commercial entity, and so there isn't an impetus to have to sell eyeball time for commercials, and that's a really important element to our democratic system, to open discourse, and is a training ground for people who want to learn about broadcasting, but also people who want to bring their talents forward. And we've seen lots of people who've worked in community television who've gone on to have careers as actors. And Tom Green from Ottawa is one example, but there's lots of examples of people who started their careers fooling around on community TV.
Mr. Shields.
So just to follow up to that, in the sense then of we've changed the definition from nonprofit. So the funding mechanism, where will they go to get the funding? Where have they gone? How does this continue on in the sense of funding now that you've changed it from nonprofit?
Mr. Manley, if you wish.
I would actually propose that we replace nonprofit with non-commercial, because that is the intent, the original intent of these programs. The funding for these type of programs, traditionally, the cable companies had an agreement to provide access to community television as part of their monopoly, and the community radio, it's a similar thing. So there with community radio, there are some funds that come through from different levels of government. There's funding that comes through with our community radio station. There's funding that comes through student service payments as part of the university's agreement with the radio station. So there's different models of funding for it, but the key thing is that it's not a commercial entity, and so it's not driven to sell commercial airtime. And when you have programming that where the intention is to sell commercial time to advertisers, the content of the program changes. And this is not an community television, community radio. There are people who are professionals that work in these stations, but it's the intent is not for it to be professionalized, and it's not for it to be commercial.
Mr. Waugh.
I would like to thank MP Manley for all his years in community broadcasting. So what I've seen is you'll get Access Communications in Saskatchewan. They have the label of community television, but yet they do pay people. They do charge through cable subscriptions, and there seems to be a little disconnect here, because I think Rogers and maybe even Bell also own community television stations, and they also, so it's really not nonprofit, because they are, in that case, I would think that Bell or Rogers or Access Communications, and in Saskatoon, it used to be Shaw that had the community tele station. So these are big conglomerates that actually, in the TV end of it, look after community television. More so than the radio, I would say. You're right on the radio, but I do have some issues on the community television, as they are owned by well-named, community like Bell and Access and Rogers and so on.
Now, MP Manley's mouth gets a little dry because that's such a valid point. That we all believe that they're going to be biased, and so he gets uncomfortable and moves around. So check this scene out. What do you think? Leave a comment below.
Prior to that, they had to provide community access television. And I agree. It's the Shaw and Rogers and Cogeco Bell, they're not nonprofit companies, but the intent of the actual programming is to be non-commercial. And I think that that's the important point.
So the important point is they're coming after the social media small guys out there like us, and they're saying that the old way wasn't biased and monopolies were good somehow, and basically they want to have the Ministry of Truth, and it looks like most parties are all into this.
Congratulations to India for announcing all its adults will be eligible for a vaccine as of May 1st. While Canada's government has not domestically produced a single dose of COVID vaccine, India has been vaccinating its population with its own vaccines produced within their borders, while also manufacturing vaccines for Canada, producing enough vaccine to supply our own populations like the Americans and Brits have. Instead, the federal Liberals have failed and put countries like India, who are facing a third wave, in an impossible situation, sending a G7 country vaccines despite needing to vaccinate their own countrymen.